Sweet. Thanks, Hannah. And yeah, thank you so much again, Tess and Rena. That was great. And there was so much good information in there. Good to see many familiar faces. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Sidra. I use she, her pronouns. I am a senior organizer and communications manager with ROP. And one of the things that y'all mentioned in our November Zooms, as Emma touched on, is wanting some more training and skill building opportunities in these spaces. So that's what we're going to use the next 20 or so minutes for here. We really just wanted to take some time to review some major lessons that ROP has learned over more than 30 years of organizing in Oregon. And one of the main things that we've learned in crisis moments like this and ones where we might need to be doing rapid response is that it's really easy for us to feel unsure about what we might need to end up doing and feel like we need to prepare for a lot of what if scenarios, which is understandable when we get there and also can be really exhausting and lead to burnout. And we've seen that firsthand. And we've found that in moments like that there are a few key things that we can be doing to build up our group strength so that we can be ready to respond to whatever comes up. Because it turns out that the building blocks that allow us to respond in crisis moments are the same ones that allow us to do long haul organizing. So our intention is that hopefully this mini training is going to be useful to everyone on this call, whether you're brand new to ROP and to organizing, or if you've been doing this for decades. And to start, I wanted to share, you all heard a little bit from Emma at the beginning of this call about who ROP is and the work that we do. I wanted to add a little bit to that by sharing that ROP's mission is to build the capacity of our member groups. And what we mean when we say capacity is really just the power to make change. And ROP focuses on supporting groups rather than individuals, both because the more people we're able to mobilize around shared values, the more powerful we'll be. And also because working in groups is more sustainable and a lot more fun. So a lot of you know this, but for those of you who don't, ROP offers that capacity support in a lot of ways, including connections with other groups that are working on similar issues. Maybe some of y'all are connecting on this Zoom right now. Specific organizing tools, activities that your group can engage around on particular issues, and a lot more. If we go to the next slide, please. Oh, there are transitions. Thanks. I also wanted to start by just getting on the same page. What do we mean when we say organizing? And at ROP, we break it down with 3 principles of direct action organizing. So the first one is it has to win real improvements in people's lives. The second is that it gives people a sense of their own power. And third is that it alters relations of power. So that might look like building strong groups and organizations. It might look like changing laws and regulations or electing the people to office who have our shared values. Okay, so we know why we want to be organizing. We know what organizing is. We also, probably most of us, have learned along the way that we can't do it alone. So we also want to talk about building a group. And I want to open it up to y'all to reflect and share in the chat if you want to. What are some of the main reasons that you found that it's really important and powerful to organize in groups as opposed to organizing alone? I know for one, if you're organizing in a group, there are more snacks generally, but I'm curious to see from y'all, what else? Why do we organize in groups? I'm seeing some answers come in. Yeah, more ideas, sharing the load. Same thing, different perspectives and experiences. I'm gonna let these keep rolling in. One of the things that's already been touched on here, right, is that organizing in group configurations allows us to organize for the long haul. So People have to move out of town. They have a family emergency come up and can't keep the work going. And if we're in group configurations, we can keep that work going over the long haul, even if individuals have to step in and out. This has been said so many times in the chat. There's diverse skills and perspectives and different things that people can bring, right? That you could never get done as an individual. Yeah, I'm seeing power. The more numbers, the more powerful we are. We're also safer. Yeah, we're resilient and strong. And it's a way to build community, right? And break isolation. So feel free to keep those coming. I'm loving all of these answers of why we organize in groups. And if we could move to the next slide. So we know we want groups. We know the strongest human dignity groups are the ones that build really strong and deep relationships. But how do we do that? How do we find the people to organize with? Next slide, please. And at ROP, we like to say that anything is possible if you have a base. When we say a base, we mean the people in your community who you can constantly count on to take action in support of the issues that you're organizing around. So we know we want to be finding your people, and this is true, right? If you are just trying to start a group and you need to build out your leadership team, or if you have a group and you're trying to build out broader. Something that we've learned over the years is that one of the kind of best ways to approach building out that leadership team or your kind of broader group is to have it be centered around shared values, because your group is going to evolve, the issues you're working on might change, the things popping up in your community might change. But with all that turnover, if your group started from a place of values, that can hold true over time. Now, to get really concrete, how do we find these people, right? Sometimes it can feel overwhelming. You can feel isolated. We would recommend, and you can do this right now if you have a piece of paper handy or your notes app, if it feels helpful, just making a list of names as a starting place. So starting with, who do you know? Who's a friend who you talk about these issues with, who you know cares about it? Who do they know? Did they mention someone who's also really hoping to get involved locally? Start with that list. Maybe you've got one name, maybe you've got 10. And then you can add to that list with who should care about these issues. Maybe you don't know them, but where are those folks? How would you find them? Is there someone in a local affinity group? Is there someone maybe in a local school who, whatever the issue is that you're wanting to organize around, it would make sense that they would be passionate about this too, right? Write down who those folks are too and how you'd go about reaching out to them. So now that we've got our list of people, we need to go do the thing that we set out to do, right? Build relationships and build trust. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Before we get to these 4 components of a key one-on-one, I'm going to ask y'all one more time to reflect for a moment and think about a time that you got involved in something. Maybe it was organizing, maybe it was some other activity. Why did you want to get involved? What compelled you to do it? What brought you in? And just kind of picture that moment that you got involved and think about why you did. My guess is that I love that, like Sam, because a friend asked, right? There's probably another person that's really core in that memory. Someone was doing something that you got excited about or brought you in, right? And one of the most important things organizers do is build relationships. And so one-on-ones are a really critical part of making that happen. For those of you who don't recognize the graphic, this is Wally and Eva, and we all need to be like Wally and Eva, right? Building a trusting relationship across difference, face to face. And we found that there are 4 key components of a strong one-on-one, reaching out to someone directly. The first thing is connection. So making a real connection with the person. We've all had that moment where you can tell that someone is reaching out just because they want something from us, right? It feels really transactional. You can tell it doesn't feel good. So figure out how to make sure that the person can tell that you're reaching out because you want to form a genuine relationship. That probably looks like asking a lot of questions, right? How did you get concerned about this issue? Why do you care about it? What brought you, if they're coming to a group meeting or they agreed to meet up one-on-one, what brought you here? But then not just asking questions about that, right? Like ask how their life is going. What are their hobbies? Are they what's going on in with their family? Making it clear that you're there for the person, right? And that's a lot of questions. It can start to feel like an inquisition. So as much as you're comfortable, also opening up and sharing a little bit about yourself too, so that it doesn't feel one-sided. The next piece is laying out a really clear ask and providing context. So say you're asking someone to take on a specific role in your group, describe that type of commitment. Maybe it's, I'm wondering if you can facilitate our next group meeting. And also sharing why you're asking that person specifically. You want this person to walk away not thinking, oh, they could have asked anyone to do this, but they just happened to ask me. Tell them something you noticed about the last time they showed up in a group space and why you think they would be really strong in this role and the particular skills or perspectives that they bring. Then the next piece, which can often be the hardest, I know it is for me, is asking an open-ended question about whether they can commit to the ask that you just laid out, in a way that makes it clear that you genuinely want to know the answer. So it can be awkward to leave that pause and leave that space for them to answer, but it's a way to make sure that you're not over asking something that doesn't fit for that person, and also that you're not under asking. Maybe they're up for doing way more than you just laid out, and if you didn't leave space, you might not find that out. So saying something like, does that sound like something you'd be interested? Opening up real dialogue around that. And then finally, following up, making sure there's time to discuss next steps, logistics, follow-up meetings, and also how you can support that person in succeeding in the ask that you just made. So those are some key components of a one-on-one. And if we could go to the next slide, please. We're going to open up the chat again. I am curious to hear from folks if you can reflect on a time you were a part of a group that really didn't feel effective. Maybe participating felt like a chore. It was draining your energy. What made that experience so rough? What about that group? And feel free to throw it in the chat if you feel comfortable. And give folks a couple minutes to think on that. Yeah, Stephanie said it felt like perfectionism was the only way to do things. What else? Lack of communication. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of stuff about group leadership either being unclear, people not feeling like they're part of decision making, not being on the same page about what your goals were. Okay, now I want you to pause and think about a time that you were a part of a really effective group that felt life-giving. You wanted to go to the meetings, you felt like you were getting energy out of it. Maybe you felt like you were succeeding towards your goals. What made that group work well? What made you want to keep coming back to that group? Yeah, warmth, connection, feeling part of a team, that community piece that we talked about. Feeling like people care about you. I love that, having a sense of agency. These are great. Keep them coming. We can go to the next slide, please. Again, you all have covered a lot of this. In the over 30 years that ROP has been a network of kick-ass groups around the state, we've learned a few things and have identified some benchmarks of a healthy group. And I would encourage y'all, as we're going through these, think back to either that group experience that you're talking about, you're thinking of right now that was so positive, or maybe to the Sheridan story that you just heard Hannah and Tess talk about, and see if you can think through that organizing story and ID these elements of a strong and healthy group in that experience. So the first one is a named leadership team with clear roles and responsibilities. We know we need leadership teams for completing regular tasks, making sure a group is functional and moving forward. It also, and this is a piece that I saw a lot in the chat, having a named leadership team adds transparency about who has responsibility in the group and who has decision-making power. And there's also the fact that when groups don't have a named leadership team, that work still has to get done, right? So it might be getting done without recognition, kind of invisibly. And if one of those folks taking on those leadership roles has something come up, like we talked about earlier, it might be a lot harder to pass off that work if it isn't kind of visible and named. The second kind of core piece of a healthy group is having a regularly used communication system for both supporters and group members and also the broader community. We know this right now, right? A lot of us are thinking about making sure that we are able to do rapid response if something comes up in our community. And if your only way that your group is communicating in this moment is, say, a Facebook group, that might work for slower communications. But if something happens, you're not going to want to sit around and wait and see if someone sees the message in the Facebook group, right? You're going to want to make sure you have someone's real name and their phone number, and you can call them up and you can all get in the living room and make a plan quickly, right? Which also brings us to our third component of a healthy group, which is having a database. It sounds nerdy and unfun, but it's really important. We really, especially in this moment, need to be in practice of tracking who we're in relationship with and having multiple ways to get in touch with folks. And then the last element of a strong and healthy group is an action plan, which I also saw come up a bunch when people were talking about groups that felt functional and thriving. Spending time on an action or campaign plan helps us feel confidence that each of the tasks we're taking on, even if that individual task might feel mundane or not exciting, that it's leading to a greater goal. So that really helps keep morale high in the group, which folks also named as important. As we're checking off tasks, we know we're building towards that really clear goal. It can also be useful, a kind of useful gut check of, are we putting our energy towards the things that are most strategic right now, right? If you're starting to work on something, you can say, does this fit into our overall goal? How are we working towards that through this? And it also helps us measure success or failure and learn from our experiences. And a few components of a strong campaign would be having a specific winnable goal, having a plan of escalating actions, and that more people are participating in those actions over time. Go to the next slide, please. So I know that was probably a lot of information to throw at y'all. The good news is that you can get more of this in a couple of different places. The first is our upcoming virtual Zoom office hours that Emma also mentioned at the beginning of the call. So we're doing these calls every other Monday, and every other call is going to be this more unstructured office hour space where y'all can come and just chat with ROP organizers as well as other human dignity leaders across the state about building your leadership team or figuring out your campaign or a specific thing that your group needs help with. So if you are already registered for office hours, great. If you didn't initially because you were like, what do they mean office hours? You can go back to rop.org/post-election, which I also think someone's going to drop in the chat, and register for some of those upcoming office hour sessions, which the next one is 2 weeks from now on Monday, the exact same time. So that's one space where you can keep getting more organizing, skill building, and support from ROP organizers. And the other is that a lot of the material we just went over tonight, as well as a whole bunch more, is in our capacity building toolkit, which is on our website. The link is also here on this slide, and we can drop it in a minute. That's another spot where you can get some of these resources. And I don't think we have time to do this on the call, but we'd love to hear from y'all what you're most excited to get out of office hours. So feel free to drop it in the chat right now if there's a particular thing where you're like, I need 20 more minutes on this subject, or my group really needs support around this campaign that we're working on. We'd love to hear how we can make that space as useful as possible for you. So I think with that, I'm gonna kick it back to Emma.